Welcome to We the Kids, where kids become We the Kids reporters and learn journalistic integrity. We the Kids' purpose is to reach and educate America's youth with patriotic and positive messages that encourage kids to become hooked on history, to be proud of America, to engage in its government, and become civic leaders. My name is Libby, and today I would like to welcome my guest, Jonathan W. White, PhD, Professor of American Studies, Senior Fellow, Center for American Studies, Christopher Newport University. I recently read his book on Abraham Lincoln and really enjoyed it. Thank you, Professor White, for joining me.
So good to be with you.
So you said your daughter wrote the book with you?
Yep, so this is Clara, and how old are you, Clara?
8, gonna be 9 on Thursday.
Yep, she's going to be 9 on
And
Thursday, and she and her big sister Charlotte helped with writing the book.
that's so fun. What made you guys choose President Lincoln?
Well, I've been writing books about Abraham Lincoln for about 15 years.
Wow.
And so I've done a lot of books for adults, but then I had Charlotte, she's 11 now, almost 12, and Clara, who's almost 9. And so a couple of years ago, or many years ago now, when they were younger, I started, telling bedtime stories and things like that for the kids. And a lot of times the stories would be sort of fun animal stories or adventure stories, but sometimes they'd be history related. And so I decided to kind of take those two aspects of my life, my professional writing about Abraham Lincoln, and then the storytelling for the kids, and try to turn it into a book for children.
Do you think that your main character is inspired by your daughters?
What do you think?
I don't know.
Well, the for the viewers, the main character is a girl named Cindy, and
Lucy.
oh gosh, I got that wrong. Is a girl named Lucy. We originally named her Cindy, and the publisher asked us to change it, so we went with Lucy. So the main character is a girl named Lucy, and it's a Monday morning, and she throws a tantrum because she doesn't want to go to school. And so she figures out, well, maybe if I dress in the silliest outfit I can, they won't let me go to school. And in dressing really silly, she puts on a top hat, and that sends her back in time to Abraham Lincoln's time. And I would say that one of my daughters doesn't like to get up in the morning and go to school. And one of them is a little more chipper and cheerful in the morning. So there might be a little bit of an autobiographical or bi family autobiographical aspect to the story.
So cool. Do you guys have any connections to President Lincoln?
We don't have any sort of familial connections in terms of being related to any Lincolns, but we've been to many, many, many Lincoln sites. So, Clara, can you think of any you've been to?
Um, We've been to his
Do you
house.
remember what city his house is in? Springfield,
Yeah,
Illinois.
and we've been to a lot of statues,
A
the
lot of
Lincoln
stuff.
Memorial, uh,
Where did we go see plays?
the Ford's Theater
For what happened there?
when Lincoln got shot.
Yep. So we've been to a lot of Lincoln sites. The girls have been to statues all over the country and his home, again, the Lincoln Memorial, like she said. So we've been to those sort of connections, but no personal connections.
How far away are those for you? Do you guys live by a lot of Lincoln sites?
Yeah. So we are about, depending on traffic, anywhere from 2.5 hours to 5 hours south of Washington, D.C. in
Oh,
Virginia.
wow.
So I go to Washington a couple times a year, and the girls go up a couple times, usually once or twice a year. You have a story about Washington, D.C. What's your story? Is it
So it's about my
about your what?
tooth when I had one that was
Oh,
missed all the way around.
if you want to tell your story, I don't know what story it is.
So when we went to Washington D.C. about I think like last year or 2 years ago, I had a tooth that I could twist like all the way around
Mhm.
and it fell out there.
It fell out in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had
One way
forgotten
to
that.
remember your trip.
You lost a trip in New York City once too. So
Yeah.
I guess she loses teeth on family trips.
Yeah. And they always
That's
get
great.
lost, and then my older sister Charlotte always finds them.
That's true. But then actually Abraham Lincoln did come down to this area. So he came down, we live in Newport News, Virginia, and we're close to a city called Hampton. And Lincoln came down to Hampton a couple of times during the war. And if you go to Hampton, there's an old fort from the 1830s called Fort Monroe, and Lincoln actually stayed there. So there's
So
an old
cool.
building that used to be the officers' quarters, and inside is a Lincoln bedroom that Lincoln would have stayed in 1862.
Wow. That's so amazing. We live in Arizona. It's kind of hard. There's not many historical monuments or sites by us, so it's quite a drive or flight to get to
Yeah.
any of those.
Have you been to Washington, D.C.?
But my parents are going to go, I think, near the end of May with my grandparents, so that'll be fun.
You'll get to go to?
No, just my
Oh,
parents.
just them. Okay.
Yeah. What do you think kids today can learn from President Lincoln?
Well, I think Lincoln has a lot that he offers for kids today. One of them is that he overcame a lot of hurdles in his life. He had a lot to overcome. He had very little education. If you were to add up all of his time in school, it was less than 1 year. And he actually, in 1858, was asked to describe his education, and he used one word, and that was defective. So he didn't have a lot of real education, but he was self-taught, and so he overcame those kind of things that were really hard for him in terms of not having someone teaching him the things that most kids, whether it's homeschool or public or private school, would have. And then he also struggled a lot in terms of he came from a very poor family, so he overcame that. When he was 9 years old, his mom died, and that was a very hard thing for him. Um, and he struggled a lot with depression, with feeling down about himself at different points in his life, or being upset about things that were going on in his life. And all of those things are people that are things that kids today experience. I think kids struggle with those things, whether it's, not having enough if they're poor, or, maybe not enjoying education or not having enough education, or, some kids have lost parents or struggle with depression. Like those are all things that Lincoln overcame. And he overcame them to eventually become, I think, our nation's greatest president. And so it can kind of be inspiring for kids to realize that someone who grew up in a literal log cabin in the middle of nowhere was able to become a really great leader.
Mhm.
What do you
It
think
shows
about
how
that?
much you can overcome.
Yeah, what do you think?
I don't
You
know.
don't know? Nothing about Abe that inspires you?
Well, let me think.
I put you on the spot. It's okay.
Wait. That he likes animals really
Oh,
bad.
yeah. You remember any of the stories about him liking animals?
I remember one about cats. I think they were like in a tree or something, or
Yeah, so
and he helped them, but there was somebody with him, and I forget.
Yeah, so Abraham Lincoln loved animals and always thought it was very important to take care of them. And there are some stories about Lincoln taking care of animals. One time when he was a boy, some kids who lived nearby were putting hot coals on the backs of turtles to see what would happen, to see if they would move faster. And Lincoln, probably not much older than you, went up to those kids and made them stop because he recognized how mean it was to them. So. And yeah, I think the story Clara's thinking of, he went to a battlefield in Virginia once and he saw some kittens that had been orphaned because their mom had probably been killed by the war. And he found the kittens and he kind of took care of them for a little bit and then gave them to an officer and told the officer to take care of them. And one time at the White House, in fact, Lincoln was sitting at a table with a kitten on his lap, feeding it with a gold fork. And Mrs. Lincoln said something like, "Isn't it ridiculous that the president is feeding this cat with a gold fork?" And Lincoln turned to the guest and said, "Well, if the fork was good enough for Buchanan, who was the previous president," he said, "then it's good enough for Tabby." And he kept feeding the cat.
What a lucky cat.
Yeah,
It's great to have like someone who's so relatable who like served as our president.
yeah.
How did President Lincoln demonstrate leadership qualities in ways that we can learn from today?
Well, Lincoln was very humble. And I think that's something that a lot of our leaders today are lacking. So a lot of times we have leaders who think that they're, all powerful because they are in power and they can kind of do whatever they want. And that's not the system that our Constitution set up, for sure. Our Constitution set up a government with limitations on power and checks and balances to keep power and to keep people from becoming too powerful. Lincoln approached power and approached the Constitution in a way that he didn't believe he could do anything he wanted. He knew he didn't always have all the answers, and he was willing to change his mind when he was given new information. And so I think that his humility is something that is a really important thing for leaders. You look like you wanted to add something to that. No?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, humility is like hard to come by these days with some of our leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all of the questions that I have. So thank you, Professor White. And one last question, sorry. Where can kids purchase your book?
Oh, well, yes. Why don't you tell?
You can buy them on Amazon for $12.
Yep. So it's available on Amazon and then other online sellers like Barnes and Noble. It's called My Day with Abe Lincoln, and it's a kids book that's geared for about 6 to 9 year olds, I would say generally. It was illustrated by a student of mine from Christopher Newport University, so that was a lot of fun to get to do. And then we had another student do the audiobook, which is on audible.com
And
or
her name
Amazon.
is Lucy.
And her name is Lucy. Yeah, I can't believe I said Cindy at the beginning when that was the original name of our character. So yeah, it's available in a lot of gift shops and places like in Illinois, where Lincoln was, but
Isn't
then
there?
mostly online you can get it. What?
Are they? I remember there was somewhere in DC also.
Yes, there are some shops in Washington, D.C. that have it. So a lot of the Lincoln sites carry it, which is fun.
Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you too, Clara. Thank you for watching. To learn more, please go to wethekids.us. There you'll find cool programs that instill in us kids a love of America's Constitution, train us for civic duty, and inspire all of us to serve others. That's wethekids.us.